Hey folks, Dr. Steve Kuniak here, and I'm talking a little bit about my theoretical orientations to counseling. So let me start off by saying that two things come to mind. I love talking about theories. This is one of my favorite courses to be involved with in some form or another, usually to teach. And I love talking counseling theories. And so one of the reasons for that is because when I was coming up in my master's program, I didn't really understand how counseling theory was important. It didn't quite make sense to me. And then after it clicked a number of years later, I realized how important it was. And so that's become a really important, I think I've said important too many times, but that's become a really important aspect of my practice is recognizing that theory really does inform the work that we do or should inform the work that we do. And so the other piece to that is that when I was learning theories, I thought I was going to align with a couple of different theories that are usually pretty popular. I remember wanting to integrate person-centered theory into my work heavily. I really wanted to like CBT because when I was coming up in my master's program, CBT had really hit a stride as far as being popular among agencies and group practices and things like that. And so it had been around for a while, but it really seemed to align with a lot of different areas of practice. And so I was hearing about it everywhere. I wanted to have that be a part of the work that I was doing. Um, and I wanted to kind of draw upon reality and choice or no solution focused brief theory, and I don't practice any of those anymore. So that's, I think, the other piece that stands out to me is, well, I do practice them, but they're not part of my intersectional theoretical orientation. I think those are the big standout things for me. Is it may not all make sense yet, but it will, hopefully. And then the other piece is don't be afraid if your theory starts to feel like it doesn't fit, because it may be changing with you as you go. So, be open to different approaches, be open to things that you don't necessarily think are going to align with you, but they may. I really like to think about this as an integrated approach. I like to look at theory as, what is our central philosophical theoretical orientation, and then what are the theoretical styles that sort of play off of that we draw upon when the main philosophical style isn't giving us what we need, or when we see a specific need that's maybe covered better by another theory. And so for me, my primary philosophical orientation is existential counseling, which is not a go-to for most people, but I've just kind of learned that it fits me. And so it's more that over the years, I realized I was practicing with existential counseling. It's not something that I tried to do, it's just something that I do naturally. And so I've gravitated more towards that. Existential counseling does not have a lot of interventions to it. And so that's why it's not popular for a lot of students, particularly, is because there's not a lot of tricks in that magician's hat that we can draw from. But I don't find that to be a problem. I actually find that to be kind of helpful. The other theories that I draw upon are structural family therapy. I did a lot of family counseling for a long while, and so that was kind of beaten into me, for lack of better words, but it fits. Like, it makes good sense to me. So particularly when I'm working with couples, families, or groups of people, that systemic approach, structural family therapy, really lines up well for me. I use it, though, with individual counseling too. You don't have to have a group of people to be able to draw upon that theoretical style. I also love narrative therapy. Those of you who know me know I love gaming and geeky things like fantasy and science fiction and all of that. And so that narrative style really makes sense to me. Like, I am kind of a natural storyteller. I love to share stories. And so I think in stories. And so the narrative approach helps me to help clients to rewrite their stories. And then I draw in a lot of Gestalt stuff. I'm not a Gestalt counselor. Really, I think to really identify yourself as being a Gestalt practitioner, the traditional way of thinking about it is that you need to kind of go through some Gestalt training, and I don't have any of those formal training pieces, but I love the orientation. It lines up really well with existential counseling. And so I love that approach that Gestalt uses. But I had a professor once who said that learning Gestalt is like reading the lyrics to a song, but understanding Gestalt and sort of owning Gestalt as part of your practice is like hearing the music to the song. And so I get the notes, but I don't necessarily bring the music into my work at this point in my professional development. It just lines up pretty well with the other stuff for me. Do I draw upon CBT? Sure. I actually use a lot of solution focused, brief orientation activities, but I don't like the theoretical style that much. It doesn't fit with me. That idea that we just have the here and now, nothing in the past is relevant to the work that we're doing in the moment, just doesn't fit with me. So I like the interventions, but you know, I'm very philosophically drawn to the existential approach. And so, to give you just a quick synopsis of how that sort of fits for me, I so the existential counseling, one of the chief underpinnings of it is the idea that our role as a counselor is to help our clients find meaning in their suffering. It's all about how we approach the experiences that we have in our life and how we, can ascribe meaning to some of those painful aspects that we get stuck on. If you haven't read it yet, I really recommend Man's Search for Meaning. It was written by Viktor Frankl, kind of the preeminent existential counseling movement, psychologists of the time. It's a tough read in parts because Frankl is talking about his experiences both in what he called logotherapy and the development of logo or logic therapy, and then his experiences surviving Auschwitz, the concentration camp, as he was a Holocaust survivor. And so he talked about how his experience in Auschwitz actually helped him to become better at understanding the principles that he was working on through logotherapy. And so, that I think is also something to kind of keep in mind if you get a chance to read the book, which I highly recommend. It was something that was recommended. It was required reading in my undergrad program. It became required reading in my master's program too. And so I really do recommend it, even though it's not the easiest read, but good book. And so I've found that even though with those sort of heavy topics being at the core of existential counseling, I use it all the time. The best example that I can give of how that philosophical approach works in my day-to-day counseling is I can remember sort of the aha moment when I realized that it all connected was I was working with a young man who was coming to me because he was a gamer and so he felt comfortable coming to me, and he was trying to navigate social circles, which was absolutely developmentally appropriate for a 19-20-year-old, trying to figure out where he belongs in the world. And so I was encouraging him to try out some new stuff, to ask out people he was attracted to go to those social events instead of shying away from them. And he was having some success. And then all of a sudden, he had his first real heartbreak. He had them before, but he also was preventing himself from interacting with a lot of folks. So he hadn't really put himself out there and then also got rejected. And so we were talking about all of this, and I was realizing that that was legitimate suffering. It was the first time he was really feeling the pain of loss around, what he had hoped to have evolved into an intimate relationship. And I was trying to help him find how he moved on from that, like what he took and what he could ascribe meaning to and keep with himself and all of that, and what he needed to leave behind as far as what was not going to be helpful to him and all of that. And we sat with the pain a lot with that experience. And so I realized that, yes, this is sort of a smaller potatoes compared to, Holocaust survivors, but it's still pain. And that human experience of when we lose something or when something doesn't quite pan out for us, we grieve that. And so that makes sense to me. And if I can kind of keep that roadmap in my mind, then the other theoretical styles become the tools that I use. But the existential approach is more my governing philosophy. So anyway, that's how I look at counseling, and I'm trying to keep it brief so that you can move on and keep learning about all of this stuff. But I love talking about it, and if I can ever be a help in the process in understanding how you approach your theories, everyone is valid. Every theory works. It's just what is going to fit for you, and then what we need to utilize with our clients for what's going to fit with them that really governs the decision making around how we approach the work that we're doing. I can't change me. I just think this way. So existential sits in the background for me all the time, but sometimes I have to play with some other theories to help get that message across to my clients that they need to have. And so that's where that integrated approach, I think, works really, really well. So the last thing I'll leave you with is I had a professor once who said, you know, I think a lot of folks in their theories classes want to be eclectic. They want to draw upon all of the theories. And, at some point in your career, you will. You'll, just like I said, you'll have some governing philosophies, hopefully, and then you'll use whatever you need to help your clients. But I had a professor who used to say that when you're experienced in the field, so when you're new to the field, you can't afford to be eclectic. When you're experienced, you can't afford not to be. And so really what that means is, when you're experienced, like I was saying, you have to draw upon everything. You have to kind of play around with all of these different approaches to make them fit. But when you're new to the field, you can't really afford to be eclectic because you don't have an anchor point. So when something really big or bad happens in session and you aren't sure where to go with it, being anchored to a theory helps you to not get tossed too far away from what you need to do. It helps to kind of keep your moorings and keep you focused. So having a theory or a few theories that you can pull from when the going gets tough is really important for we counselors in the early stages of our practice. So that's that. Hope this was helpful, and yeah, let me know if I can be any more help.